Welcome to the Sharing Without Shame podcast, dedicated to parents and anyone else who loves someone in active addiction. Education is a powerful tool in breaking down stigma, fostering understanding, and ultimately helping individuals and their loved ones navigate the challenges of addiction. With Donna Marston, author of Peeling the Onion and Sharing Without Shame. So take a deep breath and grab some tissues as we uncover the stories of love, courage, and unwavering support in the face of adversity, as Donna and her guests share their stories without shame. Because when we share our stories without shame, we inspire others to do the same.
Hello, and welcome to the Sharing Without Shame podcast. I'm your host, Donna Marston, and today's podcast is sponsored by Snap Bands. It's a unique cognitive behavior therapy bracelet that integrates gentle physical sensations with personalized mantras that instantly transform unwanted negative thoughts into positive mental focus, stigma-free. So this is the Snap Band. Mine says blessings, and they come in these little packages. And the meaning of it is, I am a blessing. I count my blessings. Every day is a true blessing. I share blessings with the world. I am grateful, thankful, and blessed. So if you would like to order one, you can go to www.snapbands, that's snapbandz.com. And under comments, just put SWOS or Sharing Without Shame. Today, I'd like to introduce you to Ashley Sohl, who is a PhD scholar exploring the archetypal and transpersonal dimensions of trauma-based addiction, meta-sobriety. She's a meta-sobriety coach and confidant, addictions counselor, psycho-spiritual mentor, astrologer, and multifaceted vibrational healer specializing in trauma-based addiction recovery. Ashley is also the creator of Cosmo synthesis, which is an approach that she uses. So welcome, Ashley.
Hi, Donna. Thank you for having me.
Very welcome. You have a lot going on that sounds really interesting, but the first thing that I'd like to ask you is, what would you like to share without shame?
There's a lot that I would like to share without shame. That it's okay to fail in life sometimes. It's okay to go through these ups and downs because they are part of life. And I'm not ashamed to say that, I had a 10-year period of being a severe addict, but that does not define who I am today.
Awesome. Yeah. Because it's a brain disorder, right? And it drives me crazy when people label them, people who have a substance use disorder, because that's not who they are. They're
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think the kinder language and utilizing needs to get out there more, because I think by doing that, it will help with the stigma.
Yes, definitely.
So you talked in your bio, some of the information that you wrote, you mentioned about stage 4 alcoholism. How does that differ from any other stage? And what are some of the common signs or symptoms that people could watch for?
Yeah, so just like any other disease, there are different stages, right? So when someone starts on the journey of addiction, and specifically alcoholism, there really is no safe level of alcohol to drink, right? So some might say that it's okay to have 2 or 3 drinks a week, 1 drink a day, but there really is, evidence suggests that no level of alcohol is safe. And so the first stage would be if someone is noticing that they're drinking more often than they would like to, but it's not quite yet an issue in their life. It's not interfering with their work and things like that. And so, you go through stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4, and throughout those stages, the person gets progressively worse with their drinking, meaning they're drinking more often. It is starting to permeate other areas of their life. It's affecting their ability to make decisions. to be a present parent if they have children, to be an effective leader or employee or partner. And, all the way to stage 4, where that's the last stage, and that's where someone is physically dependent on the alcohol to survive. And so I had gotten to that stage after almost 10 years of drinking. And at that stage, if my body didn't have alcohol, then I would start having seizures from the withdrawal. And alcohol is actually the only drug that you can die from withdrawal. That's how severe stage 4 is. And so you never want to get that far. Hopefully, if you are on that path, you recognize that you need to get help before it gets to that point.
So when you're at that point, stage 4, did your life also become unmanageable, or was it just the physical piece of it that was affecting you?
Yeah, so I would say, for my own experience, yes, in stage 4, I was a complete mess. I had lost my job. I was on the verge of losing my apartment because at that phase, I was so consumed by just making sure that I could get alcohol, right? But
Mhm.
it's interesting because at the same time, I was also mentally coming out of that phase of not admitting that I had a problem, right? I knew I had a problem. My body was telling me I had a problem. My whole life was telling me I had a problem. But at that point, it was more of a fear of the physical dependency because I knew that it could kill me if I didn't get proper help. Mentally, I wanted to be done with it. I wanted to come out of it. But grappling with that, that physical aspect, and also the shame and the guilt and all the negative emotions attached to that identity of being an addict or an alcoholic. And so, I was beyond rock bottom at that point. So yeah.
Mm. When you were at this point, I'm assuming you went to treatment.
That I did not. So that's where my
Interesting.
path differs from other people. So my whole journey of alcoholism and addiction, I experienced that with my now partner. We had gone to high school together, and we got together after we both graduated high school, and we went down that path of addiction and alcoholism together. And we broke up, and he ended up going the traditional route of treatment and rehab. He was an inpatient and then went to a sober living facility after he got out, and that was his journey. My journey was different. I tried to get into rehab, but I was alone at that point in my life. My mother couldn't help me because she was dealing with her own alcoholism and depression. And so I ended up reaching out to him after not talking to him for 2 years. I didn't even know where he was. But it turns out he had gotten help. He was clean and sober. And so he ended up coming down to New Jersey to get me, pull me out of the situation I was in. And I lived with him and a few other guys who were also getting sober. And I think just that shock out of my environment
Mm-hmm.
and then living with people who had gone through traditional treatment but were sober, and just having that support system of other people who understood what I was going through and knew what I needed. And that just set me on a path of healing that I kind of piecemealed it together. But I have to reiterate that the importance of having that sober support system of other people who really understood what I was going through and what I needed to stay away from at the
Mm-hmm.
same time. So,
So as you moved forward, did you end up going to meetings? Was that was part of your pathway to recovery?
so they had all gone to meetings. I tagged along a few times to kind of get into that sphere, right? That support system. However, I it just wasn't for me. I found it very dogmatic in its approach. And as a woman, I would go to these meetings and it was there was a lot of men there. And so after the meeting, people would gather outside, and of course, I would get asked for my phone number or, get hit on. And I didn't really that wasn't the vibe I was trying to be
Right.
around, right?
Yeah.
So I was okay with just staying with my little group of friends who were all doing the work and kind of finding that support just through them. And really, I dove into reading, educating myself on the issue and how I even got there, right? And so that led me to where I am today. It was a mix of finding support through friends and just self-education.
So would you say you were white knuckling it at any point?
Yes, and I do not advise that for anyone. One, especially
Sounds
with
like a tough
alcohol,
choice you made.
yeah, it's very dangerous. But at the point when he came down to get me, I was past the physical withdrawal aspects. So in terms of the danger of the withdrawal symptoms, I was kind of past that. Now it was a matter of keeping my mindset focused on picking out one specific goal that I wanted to move towards and not overwhelming myself with all of this other stuff. And so, yeah, I mean, I had to basically start over. So I had to get a job. I had to just start from ground zero. And when I kept my eye on one thing at a time and took one step at a time and not focused on the future or the past and really just tried to stay present in what I
Yeah,
had to do that minute, that day, that week, right? And not really go too far out ahead. And that's really what kept me going. The first year is very hard. The first year is very hard. There's a lot of tendency to want to just go back to that comfortable place, even though you know it's very bad for you. But yeah, I don't suggest white knuckling it, and I don't suggest trying to do it alone. Those are the two things that are a recipe for disaster.
yeah, right. Well, and it's interesting because I don't think people realize that addiction, I mean, recovery, whether it's from, any substance, is really almost a 10-year process. The first year, people are just starting to find the connection, right? Like you're connected with your ex and you
Hmm.
connected with some of his friends and they were a part of your pathway. And then I used to teach this class, so I should know. And then the second year, so they're reaching out the first year. Second year, they're kind of, gelling with things and being part of the programs or whatever pathway that they choose, whether, it's faith-based or not. And I think it's like year three when they start to be honest with themselves and therefore they can be honest with everybody else. Because I used to get really upset with my son. I would feel like he was lying about some things. And then sometimes he would admit to, yes, I am lying. And I was like, why? There's no reason to lie anymore. What are you covering? He said, that's just the behaviors.
Yeah.
That's what I know. And he
Hmm.
had to unlearn all of that,
Yes.
and then, and I think it's like by year six, they can finally get into relationships that are healthier because they're not looking for someone to love them, just someone to fill a void until they learn to love themselves.
Right. Right.
Any comments on all of that?
I totally agree. This path is long. It's not something that will happen overnight. I know for me, it took a whole year just for my mind to recalibrate, right? So I explain it to people like this. Imagine you're someone who doesn't drink or do drugs, right? For someone who's an addict or an alcoholic for such a long time and so heavy of a user, when we
Mm-hmm.
come out of that, it's almost like for a sober person to be drunk or high all the time. That was my mind because I was so used to being drunk or high all the time that when I was clean and I didn't have anything mind altering substance to change my perspective or my awareness, it was really it was strange. It was a weird feeling. It was almost like I was outside of myself all the time. And
Mm.
maybe energetically I was. Part of me
Yeah.
was. I was disconnected. I was dissociating, right? And so it took a whole year, maybe a little longer, just for my brain to kind of come back to a normal way of functioning. And so
Mm-hmm.
that was really hard. But for me, when I came out of it, a few months out of, just getting sober, I was just so thankful that I wasn't experiencing withdrawal and feeling so horrible and stuck in that other situation that I was in, that the fear of living like that again was enough of a motivator for me to keep going in a different direction. But yeah, there are different challenges with each year that you are in sobriety. And because, so 2 years out, 3 years out, a lot of people will say, well, I've gotten this far. maybe I can have one drink, or maybe I can go out with friends and be okay. But again, it comes back to, if you haven't healed the root cause of what made you drink in the first place or do drugs in the first place, whether that's healing a trauma or seeking that connection with a higher purpose or the divine or whatever it is that you were trying to reach through drugs and alcohol, until you satiate that or heal the trauma, there's always the chance that you're going to slide back to it. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's really the important work that needs to be done on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, forever. I think, it's like learning. We never stop learning. This work is continuous, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And what you were describing about your brain is really post-acute withdrawal syndrome.
Yeah.
Right. So typically is that it takes, depending on how long you used, that it could take, I believe, up to 18 months for
Yeah.
the brain to heal. And it's interesting because people would say to me, my child's been in recovery for like 8 months or 12 months or 15 months, and they always seem like there's brain fog going on.
Yeah.
And so I would explain to them about PAWS, post-acute withdrawal syndrome, and you could see this relief, like, oh, okay. And I said, give them 18 to 24 months, and you'll start to see the changes. And then they'd come back and say, oh my goodness, it's amazing. You can see it's a whole different conversation. You can see that they're present, and so it really takes its toll on everybody, on
Hmm.
everybody that's involved. So what else did you do to maintain this? How did you you went from white knuckling it to healing, and was it, you have so many accolades here. Where did you start first? Did you get into astrology first, or where did you go to start, your stepping stones to where you are today?
Yeah. So right after I got sober, and after I picked up the first few pieces, right? So I had to get a job, I had to make a living, do all the things that, so I could survive, basically. And once that was taken care of, I really, to me, it's really about having a deep sense of fulfillment and meaning in your life.
Mm-hmm.
Without that, we don't have a guidance system to keep us on a healthier path, right? And so I really did a lot of contemplation about, okay, I really got a second chance, because doctors, several of them told me I shouldn't have even been alive. And so for me, it's like, okay, I have the second chance. When I was going through that last withdrawal, I had like a spiritual awakening. I heard, uh, I say heard, but it's more like a voice inside my head, but also inside the room, tell me that you have to pull through this because you're meant for something more.
Mm.
And that rung in my head like a bell. It was so loud and clear, and I didn't know if I was hallucinating or what was happening, but it has stuck with me to
Mm.
this day. And so I used that opportunity of a second chance to look back on, what was I trying to do before I even went down this path, and really try to find those nuggets of purpose and wisdom in what I liked to do when I was a child, and what I really wanted to pursue in school. So I decided to go back to school. And again, take it a little at a time and not try to think too far out ahead. And so I went back to school. I was working two jobs, and that kept my mind on something more positive.
Yeah.
And so I got my bachelor's degree. And it was during that time that I decided, what's the one thing I've always wanted to do since I was a kid? I'm going to do it. And that was go to Africa. And I was working at a full-time job at a consulting firm, and I had another part-time job. And I thought, how am I going to do this? I don't know how I'm going to pay for it. How am I going to leave my job? What am I going to do when I get back? Or am I going to have a job when I get back? But I approached it from a beginner's mind, and I just said, I'm going to figure out how to do this. And I did it. And I had a job when I came back.
Good for you. That's
So,
awesome.
yeah, and it was great because I was an adult continuing education student, and I was the first one to go on a study abroad, which paved the way for other adult learners after me to do the same thing. And so I thought, okay, well, if I could do that, then I can really do anything, right? And so I decided to pursue furthering my education in international affairs. I wanted to be a conflict and post-conflict photojournalist. So I went to graduate school, got my degree. And during that time, though, I had 2 children. So I kind of had to refocus my career, aspirations, because I couldn't really go into conflict settings with 2 babies at home.
Yeah, right.
So I used that time to kind of take a break and figure out, okay, now what, right? Now what do I do? Well, I was really at that time I started learning about astrology and really depth psychology. I was very much into Carl Jung and understanding how I ended up on the path that I did. There
Mm.
had to be a higher purpose and a reason for it. And I kept going back to that awakening that I had in that moment, that horrible moment of withdrawal. And then looking back to my first daughter, she was a blessing. We weren't planning on having children right before I started grad school, but she came early and was born on my sober date. And
Oh,
that huge synchronicity has not been lost on me. And again, it's moments like that that really make me stop and think I was put here for some other reason that I need to figure out, right?
yeah.
And she was born to say, hey, I'm here. She came almost a month early. I'm here and I'm being born on your sober date. You need to pay attention to what
Wow.
happened in your past and why you're here now, right? So that led me down this path of really trying to figure out, why do people end up as addicts and end up as alcoholics? What is it? And why is the current model so broken?
Yeah,
There
right.
has,
Let's talk
right,
about that.
right, but on both sides, not just for the addict or
Mhm.
the alcoholic, but for the families.
Yeah.
That
Oh,
I feel like they're left in the dark, right?
absolutely.
It's again, the work that I do is really centered around the family aspect. How do
Yeah.
we break those generational cycles
Yeah.
of trauma, of addiction, and help people who are seeking that feeling of coming home to that place where we all know it's there inside of us, right? Whether you find that through religion or through spiritual practice or through community or family, doesn't matter, right?
Right.
But for me, it's that I really want to help families understand the cycles of trauma and how they can manifest as addiction. And it's not even trauma in your immediate life, but it's generational.
Yeah.
My grandfather was in World War II. I could only imagine the trauma that he experienced, and then my great grandfather, right? But
Hmm.
that lives in our DNA. And so sometimes we don't understand why we go down certain paths of self-harm, right?
Hmm.
And so
Yeah.
there's a big educational component that needs to happen on top of a destigmatization of addiction and trauma in general. And I think we need to talk about this more openly. And, like you and I had talked before about the labels, we need to stop labeling people as sober addicts and sober alcoholics, or addicts and alcoholics in general,
Yeah.
after they've overcome that difficult period, right? I mean, we don't define people who have overcome cancer as people with cancer. That's not who they are, right? That's
Mm.
just a phase of their life that they struggled with and now they're over it.
Right. Yeah. And there is language, if I'm out speaking or if I talk to somebody, and I will say that I have a son who's a person in long-term recovery. And
Hmm.
and they kind of look at you like, what? What does that mean? And I talk, he hasn't had a substance since whenever I, explain all of that. But it's a kind way of educating people without saying, don't say those words. I don't,
Right.
they're just not nice. But
Yeah.
yeah, labels are for jars. They're not for for people, you know,
Yes. I like that.
just the way it is.
Uh,
So through this journey, you came up with a concept called, and I'm not sure which came first, Cosmo synthesis
Cosmosynthesis. Yeah.
or the meta sobriety. Which came first?
So the idea of meta sobriety came first. The word just popped into my head one day when I was doing some research, and it came from a place of really sitting and thinking about, how did I get here? How did I go through recovery? But I can go out and socialize. I can sit in front of someone drinking a glass of wine. I can go to a bar and not be triggered. I don't think about alcohol at all. I can watch a television show or a movie where it's so prevalent in media and it doesn't affect me. It's just as if someone was drinking a cup of coffee or a tea, right? And so I was sitting there thinking like, okay, so there's different phases of addiction and recovery, but there isn't just the addiction phase and then the recovery phase because there's something beyond that, right? And again, it comes back to not being labeled because that label will keep people in that recovery phase. But we are completely different people when we can come out of it and get to a place where we are not triggered by substances. We're not triggered by anything. We don't feel the need to turn to alcohol or drugs or shopping or whatever the addiction might be to satisfy an urge or a need, or to cope with stress. And so I thought, well, that's it. Meta sobriety literally means beyond sobriety. We are not now defined as in recovery or as sober people. We're just who we are, who we were when we came into this world as children, as infants. There's this phase in between where we were an addict. We were acting out these self-harming behaviors and behaviors that were harming people around us, but we are not that anymore. And once we can help someone fully heal the trauma, fully integrate those aspects of themselves that they were running away from, right? The shadow aspects, bring them up, heal them, and then integrate them. And only when we can do that are we in a place beyond sobriety, right? We are now back to who we were as that little soul that came in the moment we were born, right? That's what we're trying to get back to.
Yeah. Well, healing's revealing.
It is.
When we reveal, it all starts to happen.
Yeah.
But it can take a lot to go through that, to feel that pain and whether you have an SUD or not, we all have stuff that we in working, I'm a constant work in progress. I'm always finding different things that show up, and then you work on taking care of that.
Right. Right.
So what's the Cosmo synthesis?
So Cosmo synthesis is a framework that I created to help people. It's really, the foundation is to root out the trauma and heal it. But I take a three-part approach. So trauma lives not just in the subconscious. It doesn't just drive our actions and beliefs and behaviors from a place of non-awareness. It lives in our tissues, in our cells, in our DNA, in our energetic body. So there has to be a way to address the trauma in all areas of our being. And so that's what this does. We look at the body, all aspects, the nervous system, the skeletal system, the muscles, the tissues, the energetic body, right? And find the trauma and heal it in those different places. We work with the mind, but not just the subconscious. We actually look at someone's worldview. What is your belief about why you're here? What is your view of reality? What is your belief about your role in the universe, in your family, in your community, right? Because I know for myself, I was a self-proclaimed atheist, right? I didn't believe in any religion. I wasn't even spiritual, but I realized after I got sober and started, we had talked about this before. I thought, well, the way I was living, the way I was thinking wasn't working before. So let me do the exact opposite and see if that works. And it did. And so I became open-minded to learning about different cultural cosmologies and spiritualities and things like that, and coming at it with a beginner's mind, right? And not being judgmental or dismissive. And when I was able to do that and expand my vision of possibility for what reality is and how I fit into it, I completely changed. And so that for me has to be also a foundation. And it's not coming from a place of being dogmatic or religious or pushing viewpoints on people, but letting people know that there are other things out there. There are other possibilities and ways of experiencing the world and life that maybe you hadn't thought of that could change your perspective on what your addiction actually was for you and why it happened to you, and to not be so judgmental with yourself, right? And to be easy and have self-compassion and self-love. And so then we look at the soul aspect, right? So I know people have probably heard this, but you, God, or the universe, whatever you want to call it, doesn't give you what you can't handle. And so you were
So they
given,
say.
right? Well, and some people believe that you choose the life you live before you come into it, right?
Yeah.
Whatever your belief system is, right? But we have to figure out what that belief system is so that you can kind of mold it and move forward with it and try to understand from a different perspective or multiple different perspectives why you went through that challenge in your life and what it means for you moving forward, right? Because it's one thing to heal the trauma, but you don't want to be left in a vacuum. We have to replace that with something more healthy, right?
Right. Yeah.
So what can you do moving forward so that you keep yourself from moving back to that old version of yourself, right? And so that's where the purpose and the deeper meaning and fulfillment has to come in. It has to be, you have to have a North Star, a guiding light that you keep working towards, a goal, whatever that is, right? It could just be to have a family and raise happy, healthy children. It doesn't mean you need to go out and save the world, right? I think that's a misnomer that people have, this idea of purpose and meaning in life feels very big and overwhelming for some people because they think that it has to be some grand thing, but it doesn't. It doesn't. Whatever makes you happy, that's it, right? And it's an ever evolving, changing thing. What you love to do today probably isn't going to be what you love to do in 10 years, but that's a good thing because that means that you're evolving and growing,
Right.
right?
Right. So what would a session look like if somebody came in? I don't know if you can, no names or anything, but can you talk about a session, what it would be like, or someone that you've worked with utilizing what you've created
Mhm.
and share it with people so they'll have a better understanding and maybe would like to set up an appointment to come to you and have a session rather than going, oh, that sounds scary. I have to get in touch with my feelings. Are you kidding me? Yeah,
Yeah.
because that's hard for people.
Yeah.
For some people, just recovery is overwhelming. The thought of that, right? Now you're
Mhm.
going to add this layer to it. So if somebody came to you and said, I'm new in recovery, I've heard about these really cool things you do. What would a session look like? And what do I need to do? Is it, what will happen? Is there a guarantee of these shifts, or how would you explain this to somebody, or give us an example of someone that you've worked with, how it began for them when they met you and where they ended up in their process?
Mhm.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So when I do this work, I call it a framework because it's not a step-by-step process because everyone is different. And so when people come in, they could be at completely different points in their path, right? And their needs are going to be different. However, there's an underlying system that I do use. So when someone comes in, we do a really deep intake of their history because I need to know, what was your childhood like? Why do you think this happened, right? I'm trying to understand what their perspective is of what happened, how they got there, and how they can move forward. Because we need to create a baseline so that we have something to measure at the end, right? At the progress. That's how we measure the progress. So we do that. We do a really deep intake and a history, family history, go back as far as you can to understand perhaps what trauma was happening for your parents, your grandparents, your great grandparents. What does your family lineage look like? And for everybody, that's not possible because some people are adopted or they just don't know,
Right.
which is fine. We go back as far as we can. And then we pick, I do a little bit of coaching to understand what is the thing that's holding you back right now? What is that thing, right? And so I do what I call somatic hypnotherapy because what happens a lot of time is when someone experiences a trauma in childhood, they have an emotional reaction to it, right? Whatever the event was,
Yeah.
but that emotional reaction didn't come to completion, right? So it kind of goes up, but it stays stuck. And that's the trauma that gets stuck in the body, right? And
Ah,
so during this hypnotherapy session, and they're not going into a deep trance. It's a very light trance. They're awake. But what we're trying to do is find that where that trauma is stuck in the body, specifically in the nervous system, because that is what creates the fight, flight, freeze, and fawn response in people. And that's what keeps people stuck in adulthood. They can't achieve a goal because they don't know why they can't achieve it, but they can't move forward, or they self-sabotage, right? We need
Right.
to find out why those things are happening, why they're having these bouts of negative self-talk, why they feel these things about themselves or the world or whatever, right? And so when we can find it in the nervous system through the hypnotherapy session, their unconscious mind knows where to take them. It knows the starting point of that traumatic experience, that trauma, right? And so what happens
Wow.
is that one experience could happen over and over and over again in their life in different ways, but it's condensed into a system of experiences. So once we go to the first time it happened and we heal that, we can move that person through the other times automatically. They don't have to remember those other times or recall them at all. Once we find the initial one, the person will sit there and they'll feel it. They'll feel it where it is in their body. And the idea is to have them fully feel it so that that loop can be closed. And so now it's not stuck in their nervous system. But there's many of these that we have to go through, not just one or two or three. There's many little or big traumatic events that happen in people's lives, whether they know that or not.
Right.
We have to clear all of those. So we do that subconsciously. That works with the nervous system, but we also do, sound therapy where they can do this themselves, even with just a tuning fork or a singing bowl, because
Mhm.
the frequency of the sound, certain frequencies will penetrate the body. And what happens is it allows that dense ball of energy to break up and
Mhm.
move the energetic system more freely and flowing so that you don't literally feel stuck or feel heavy or weighed down or disconnected, right? And so we do that. And I also use stone medicine, which is a Taoist tradition. So coming from the acupuncture modality, we use stones instead of needles. And again, this is because energy can be changed and mutated from a distance. I can do this as distance healing, or I can do it in person. But there's two specific protocols that I use specifically for addiction treatment, because it literally goes deep into the soul and removes that detrimental stuck energy, that heaviness, that heavy smoking, heavy drinking, heavy drug use creates within the energetic system and the physical body. So, but again, like I pull these things out from this framework depending on what that person needs in the moment. So when I start working with someone, we look at the immediate needs and we pick one immediate goal, because the idea is not to overwhelm someone, right?
Right. Yeah.
So what do you need healed right now? And what do you want to work towards right now? And we take it slow. And in between I do Jungian coaching. So I use a lot of depth psychology. We work with archetypes and symbols. We do dream work, because I found for myself that first year and even to this day, I have dreams of, in my dream, I'm drinking, and
Mm.
I can feel the anxiety in my body in my dream. And so again, how do we work with the subconscious in different ways? Well, dream work is very powerful because it's it, dreaming is your subconscious's way of communicating with you, but it communicates in symbols, not language. And so how do we decipher that? How do we work through that? So there's a lot of journaling, a lot of meditation, and a lot of letting go, letting go of outcomes, letting go of shame and guilt, and a lot of forgiveness as
Mm.
well.
Yeah. Wow. So how long does a typical session last?
So the hypnotherapy part, typically about a half an hour. So the first session will be about 2 hours because we do the intake, we do
Yeah.
talking and things like that. But about, 30 minutes, 30 to 40 minutes. Again, it's dependent on the person. Same thing for the energy healing aspect of it. It could be 30 to 40 minutes, no more than 40 minutes. And again, this work is done slowly. So it would be done every 2 weeks, because whatever we pull up from the hypnotherapy session, your body And your energy and your physical body and your mind need time to process it and integrate it. So we don't go too fast because it can be overwhelming to your nervous system, to your mind. And we don't want to re-traumatize people. So we take it slow and we just work on one thing at a time. Every 2 weeks we do. And if there's still something that wasn't fully complete, we'll go back to it until it is done. And as someone starts healing and integrating these traumas, they start opening up. They become brighter. They become more energized. They become happier, right? And so, the one thing that I found working with people is that they will say how much better they feel, but not consciously thinking about it. And other people notice it first. So a partner will say, I've noticed you X, Y, and Z. You feel happier. You seem happier. You seem lighter. You're more energetic. You're interacting more with people. It will come from the outside first, and then you'll start to notice it yourself.
So when you do it remote, is it on like Zoom?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So you do see the person,
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
over the phone.
No.
Okay. Do you need to see the person to see how their body's reacting?
Yes, because of the somatic aspect of it, it's much more helpful for me to see them. And also I look at their facial expression when they have their eyes closed, because if it's something that you can see the release, right? Their face will be scrunched up and tense and tight when they are in that feeling that they don't want to feel, right? But it's really important to stay with it because it needs to complete. It needs to go up into the highest point of that anxiety feeling or whatever that feeling is, and then start to come back down, right? Because that's how your nervous system is going to know that it can go back into homeostasis, right? So I need to see their face to make sure that they're not getting stuck somewhere, right? I'm starting to do in-person retreats where we come together and we do this work in person, because there's something about creating a safe container, but an energy field of people, and really harnessing multiple people's energy to really make this healing even more profound, right? So, and then we do, on the body stonework and things like that.
So where do you have your retreat?
I'm actually planning one right now. I'm thinking about upstate New York. So it's not anything crazy or fancy or, over the top, but really it's just about doing this work in person in a different setting that is, in nature. We can do the sound therapy, get people together and have them experience it, because it's one thing to experience, especially like sound healing with headphones on, which is fine. It works, but there's something otherworldly about feeling it, right? Literally, your body feels the vibration, and that's really key. So
you mentioned tuning forks and like singing bowls. What about drumming? Is there any of that?
Drumming is a really great way to induce hypnotic states, like trance states. So I don't really experiment with drums yet, but it is something that I really want to get into, especially for the meditation part. There's a reason why native cultures use drumming, right? Shamanic drumming and everything.
Yeah.
But I like to use tuning forks because that's something that someone can easily purchase. They're not expensive and they can do it themselves, right?
Yeah.
And get a real feel for it, right? I have my kids play with them. They use them too. So it's something you can get your family involved with and pass on what you learn.
Yeah. I've been going to a woman for quite a few years who does the tuning forks. And, so I used to put on a Restore Your Spirit Day, and we would have drumming, and it just gets your body going, right? It just like this, it's just empowering to me anyway. And we have a woman that I know of in New Hampshire who does classes where people get to make their own drums.
Oh, that's neat.
Yeah, so if you ever come to New Hampshire, I can give you her information.
Yeah, I would like that.
I think she travels all over. Maybe it's possible she'd even come to your retreat in upstate New York.
Yeah, I would like to get other experts to come in. So that would be amazing if you could send me her information, because that would be definitely something that I'm interested in incorporating into the sound healing aspect, just because I know how powerful it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's just, I don't know. I love all that stuff anyway. So
Yeah.
it just amazes me how it transforms you if you can relax right? If you can allow yourself to relax and get out of your head and just be able to move forward and enjoy it, which can be tough, right?
It can be, but once you do it a few times, you're really trying to train your body to be okay with being relaxed, right? We live in a culture where we're always on the go, always doing something, right? And sometimes people have a hard time relaxing. They don't know, they get more nervous and anxious trying to relax. That's just their body's response, right? And so that's why I incorporate sound therapy, because it's really important to let their nervous system and their body know that they can calm down and it's okay to be in that restful state, right?
Hmm. Well, I think solitude and quiet can be unnerving for some people
Yeah. Yeah.
because they have to stay busy because their their head is their health, basically,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
All the thoughts that are going on and whatnot. And I know, when I was dealing with my son, my head, I would tell myself awful stuff. You're a
Yeah.
terrible mother. It's all your fault, and it was just crazy. But now I've learned. It's taken me a long time, but I do a lot of healing techniques and meditation and journaling and whatnot. And it's a shame that it's taken so long. I learned it later in life, which is a shame. But it's such a beautiful experience when you allow yourself to move through this trying emotions, to come out on the other side and really start to love oneself, because
Yeah.
isn't that what it's all about
It
with
is.
addiction? I mean, typically people are looking for love in all the wrong places, and they self-medicate to fill that void, but they don't understand what it is, whether they were traumatized or no, they could have had loving families
Mm-hmm.
and they still don't feel the love, right?
Yeah.
And it's doing that work too, right? To get reconnected to self
Mm-hmm.
and in community so that you can start moving forward
Yeah. It's really
one day at
important.
a time.
The connection, yes, the connection piece is very important because, throughout addiction and even for the people on the other side of that, right? It's very easy to dissociate and kind of disconnect from everything as a coping mechanism. But
Hmm.
how do we bring ourselves back home to ourselves,
Hmm.
to connection with other people? And there's different ways to do that, spiritual practices, healing practices, meditation, and just communing, right? Getting together with other people who have similar values and are
Hmm.
also on some kind of journey of healing. And I think we all are in some way. We should be, right? That's the natural progression of the evolution of
Yeah,
consciousness.
right. And finding people of like mind is really important.
Hmm.
And sometimes there might be some loneliness behind, until you get to find those connections. Sometimes it's just baby steps,
Yes. Yeah.
So, so thank you for coming on. And one thing I'd like to ask, or for you to share with all the listeners, if somebody wanted to do this work with you, how do they get in touch with you?
So they can go to my website. It's Ashley Sohl, SOHL.com. And you can just go to my contact page and send me a message there. And we can just hop on a call, and I'm happy to go through the process, understand what stage someone is at on their journey. If there's someone who is either a family member or a parent on the other side of it, or someone in active addiction or recovery, it doesn't matter.
So
Because
do you work with people when they're active?
yes, but different stages. Most of the time, they have to be willing to go through detox or anything like that. For a while, I wasn't working with those types of people, but I have resources where I can send people to get that piece done first, right? Because there's different phases of that
Mhm,
part of the recovery process. But
mhm.
someone has to be willing to do that work and be not physically dependent,
Right.
because we can't go through the other pieces until that part is taken care of. But yes, once that's done, then we start moving into this kind of work.
Okay. Want to say your website again
Yes,
before we sign off?
it's ashleysohl.com, SOHL.
Thank you. Well, thank you for coming on. I really
Well, thank you.
appreciate it. This has been wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in. If you'd like to support the Sharing Without Shame podcast, please subscribe, like, and leave a review. If you're in need of emotional support, Donna offers private sessions. For more information about Donna and the services she offers, visit www.sharingwithoutshame.com or email her at donna4support@comcast.net. Nothing in the Sharing Without Shame podcast is intended to establish a therapist-patient relationship or intended to replace the services of a trained therapist, doctor, or health professional, or substitute for professional mental health, medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Until next time, may your faith and strength heal your heart.